going on, everybody? It looks like we are live. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Sound Money Podcast. I am your host, Steve McGarry, where we explore everything about technology and business. And in today's episode, I'm going to be going over something that is being talked about more today, and it is universal basic income. I've been getting this question quite a lot because a lot of you know that my background is in economics and studied it for 4 years, game theory, Karl Marx, Adam Smith, all those creative fellows there. But I have been hearing a lot more because there is a presidential candidate in the United States that has been talking a lot about universal basic income. And it's repackaged as something called the freedom dividend. And that is from Andrew Yang. And he is an econ major as well. So he has a lot of really interesting policy suggestions out there that he's been talking about. And the flagship one is UBI, Universal Basic Income. If you're brand new to this concept, it has been suggested by many people in the past. Milton Friedman, Martin Luther King, a lot of people that were brilliant and talking about uplifting a lot of the lower socioeconomic levels. And one of the most important parts to think about here is it is a way to increase the consumption power of citizens. And everything that I'm covering today is going to be simplified down. So for everybody that's already familiar with this, uh, you know, just bear with me here. So increasing the consumption and the ability to consume goods and services from citizens of a sovereign country, you are going to really not completely avoid, but you are very well insulated against repeated recessions. And recessions happen in a capitalistic society, of course, but when you have a society that is purchasing and going through the economy consistently daily, and they are a powerhouse of spending, you are effectively floating the economy from the ground up. And it's important to also acknowledge that a lot of these people that we're talking about that are sharing on Twitter, because more recently in the presidential debate, Andrew Yang came out and said, if you go to my website right now, I'll give 10 families $1,000 a month for a year. And he got 450,000 emails and hundreds of thousands of people to the website. And they raised $1 million just from doing that initial stunt, we could call it. And it really reframes the way that politics are working. And for the record, I don't really talk about politics a lot, but this is just a fascinating time for technology and politicians. And I think that with Andrew Yang bridging that gap, where he literally brought 450,000 data points into his campaign during that debate on the stage there, that's mind blowing. And he's growing at an exponential rate compared to the other candidates because he's leveraging tech in a way that no one else that's running is doing. And I find it really fascinating from my perspective that a lot of people think that this is a brand new concept of UBI, and it's not. I think that in school, I studied things similar, but the overall idea that you have the lower socioeconomic level given a floor, that alone, knowing that you have some buffer there and you're not, completely disenfranchised 24/7 and you're not worried about making all ends meet, you have some protection. That alone is enough to increase consumption as well as innovation and entrepreneurship and business as a whole. So there are some figures that I wanted to just toss out there. And these are figures that are more so being redefined by Andrew Yang and his campaign. But these figures are around what have been around for a very long time. And the universal basic income at this level, providing $1,000 a month to every U.S. citizen, would be at $12,000 a year for everybody over the age of 18. Providing that the poverty level is $12,500 a year. So you're still below the poverty level. You do have to work still because $12,000 is not going to be enough to survive in the future. So what we have is the income level at that $12,000 mark would grow the economy by 12.56 to 13.1%, or about 2.5 trillion by 2025. And it would increase the labor force by 4.5 to 4.7 million people, putting money into people's hands and keeping it where they would be a perpetual boost to supply the job growth in the economy. So that's from his website. I'll be leaving the link to that in the description below so you guys can go check it out yourself. But I think that the really interesting problems that aren't being, I mean, they are being discussed, but it's through a very different lens. The most interesting one is that 40 million people in the United States live below the poverty line. 40 million. I think it's kind of a mind-blowing number to think about, that many people live below the poverty line that I just mentioned. And I think that lifting that 40 million up, giving them the power to consume goods, and just lifting them up slightly, giving them a floor that's not zero. And I think that alone will direct the economy in a positive way. So this has been tested with a few people. I know Y Combinator, the startup accelerator in Mountain View, California, where I used to live, they have tried this with families in Oakland, California, and they're still in the midst of doing that study. So I'll be interested to see what happens from that data, because I'm sure that's all coming to light. There are various startups like Alexis Ohanian of Initialized Capital. You know, he's actually investing and helping Yang support more families. There are companies that are coming out of the woodwork saying, like, we will support additional families. So really interesting support coming from people in the startup world that are helping him out. So some of the other benefits to this in the economy is that, other than the consumer buying power and the fact that 40 million people are below the poverty line currently, and it would really help those people out, it's going to create a new type of marketplace. When you have $1,000 guaranteed per person, you're going to get communities forming. Like, for example, single mothers, where let's say 10 single mothers are all trying to make ends meet. They could all aggregate together in, let's say, an apartment complex, pool resources together, and cohesively succeed in survival. Much easier than the current situation that they may be in. And I think that, when you get these sort of commune situations coming together where people are aggregating their resources, you could come up with some really creative things, almost like a consensus type way of running a little organization. So the sort of lead up to this that has been positioned, and there are arguments against this, but there are the arguments that the automation using AI and machine learning and things like that are going to take away jobs. It's going to completely obliterate jobs. And I've seen this firsthand. First job out of college, I was working for a logistics company, and you could see that these warehouses were very much robotic already. And this was in 2012. They were already being automated by massive machines, and it just changes the way the workforce operates. And that is considered an industrial revolution. Do I think it's happening extremely quickly? Yes. Do I think that it'll happen in the next 5 years? Maybe. I don't really think that the probability of 5 years is that high. 10 years? Yes. I think that there are going to be a lot of people out of work in 10 years. So getting ahead of this is going to be pretty important. And it's important to also take into account that everybody listening to this, and myself included, I mean, this is uh, it's something that not necessarily will benefit everyone. Like some people don't need an extra $1,000 a month, but at the same time, it's that vote of confidence, knowing like, okay, I am still a stakeholder in this great American experience or experiment called the United States, where I'm a stakeholder. I get my dividend being paid out to me, and it's just a vote of confidence in the fact that you are a stakeholder in the country, and other people knowing that they're getting it will help out. So the idea that is aggressive, I think that is a large portion of like retail, truck drivers, and things like that. So I do believe that those jobs are definitely going to get automated, but those people need to move into a position where they're not necessarily just going to get replaced. I believe that they need to upskill or train themselves to learn something else. So this brings me into Naval's point that I've mentioned on the podcast in the past about upskilling people every 10 years and paying for it as a country. I think that that's a very good idea to help people out. But I don't want to get too much in the weeds here about things outside of UBI. I do think that increasing the consumer buying power creates a lot of support for the economy when people are working together, all purchasing through Amazon and things like that. And it helps the economy as a whole. And the final piece is, how do you pay for it? And this is done through a value-added tax. Value VAT is what the short way of saying it is. Europe has one that I believe is 15%. So if you buy a product on Shopify from a company based in the UK or in Europe, anywhere, you're going to pay a VAT. And that isn't here in the United States yet. Yang is the only one talking about that. That is how you are going to tax people like Amazon and all of the FANG companies, your Facebook, your Apple, your Amazon, your Netflix, and your Google. You're going to tax them through that. And that's how they're going to pay for the jobs that they're destroying, with Amazon absolutely demolishing malls everywhere. They're going to have to pay for that wreckage, and that's through a VAT, which makes perfect sense, pays for a vast majority of this, but the other majority will be paid through the people's purchasing power. So that's my high level of what UBI is, what there's being suggested out there by various people, mainly Andrew Yang right now, because he's front and center talking about it. And then the last piece was how it can be paid for. And I think that those are probably the most pushback there is about paying for it, as well as the rate in which automation does take these jobs away from people based on that McKinsey report I mentioned. So that's it for this episode. I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you guys are listening or viewing this, and I will see you guys on the next episode.